Persistence and perseverance. Do you have what it takes? Let's find out right now on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today, we continue our Grit series, in which we talk about how the pathway to success runs through hard work. Today's guest is Steven Tran, managing partner for Brandcreative. Steven Tran owns 4 businesses in Southern California, many with global footprints, all while being just a dash over 30 years old. Please welcome great person, good friend, Steven Tran.
Thanks, Jay. Really happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with all of you today.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Steven, for joining us today. It's really a joy to hear about the incredible grit that you have had throughout your career. Steve, could we start with your first, your first company, Brandcreative? Could you talk about how you developed and grew that company?
So I think that my background is in automotive, and I'd worked at a couple places previously, and seeing how other leaders run their organizations and wanting to improve them really inspired me to start a company on my own. Not necessarily because I thought I could do it better, but I didn't really want to stop at the 40 hours. I wanted to continue on and keep going. And having a limitation of working somewhere is kind of the stop button. When 5 o'clock hits, you have to stop. So being an entrepreneur kind of suited me better because I love the pursuit. And that's really how I got started, just by the example, leading by the example of others. That's how I got it going.
And so that's how you got going. And how did you build the company while you were still in school?
So at the time I was working on several different race teams, playing different roles, kind of identifying what aspects of motorsports and what aspects of business that I enjoyed, and kind of gravitated towards marketing just because it's this beautiful combination of business and sociology. And so how I got started was I literally just worked at different organizations, networked on a consistent basis. And when I felt that I had enough of a network that I could begin my organization, I did. And some of the first supporters of the company were our first clients and just friends, essentially. And from there, it kind of blossomed into a large organization. And I guess history, it tells you how the story goes.
So let's talk a little bit about work ethic and hard work and what role that might have played in your success during your career.
So fundamentally speaking, I mean, to be an entrepreneur, it just requires this incredible diligence and perseverance, and on many levels, not only just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And I think, honestly, what makes a successful business is just having this insane work ethic. There's always going to be someone faster than you. There's always going to be someone better than you, stronger. And the best thing that you can do is just throw just the best absolute work ethic into anything that you do. There's always somebody watching. There's always potential clients that are always in the wind and keeping an eye on your career. And I think the most important part is no matter what you do in life, pursue it completely and honestly, and make sure that you take care of your customers and clients. And work ethic is probably, I would argue, 90 to 95% of entrepreneurship. And in terms of what factors will maintain or make you successful. Because no matter what, as long as you work through any problems or scenarios, there's always a solution out there. And work ethic can push you through any problems or obstacles that you can face.
Do you think that a lot of entrepreneurs who maybe don't succeed, do you think maybe they're not putting in the time, maybe not putting in the effort sometimes?
I think entrepreneurship comes with a lot of there's a lot of ideas on what entrepreneurship is, and it really boils down to work ethic. And I think you're absolutely right on that point. There are a lot of entrepreneurs that believe it to be telling people what to do and hiring people and just collecting the funds, so to speak. But entrepreneurship is based on being the hardest working person in the room and having all the answers when it's necessary, especially when you start building up a team. They're going to look for you for leadership. They're going to look for you for answers. And I think a lot of failures is not having the perseverance to continue. And don't get me wrong, that's a very, very easy thing to say in retrospect. But at least in my career, in my life as an entrepreneur, you're literally going to have every kind of stone thrown at you. You're going to get punched in the face over and over and over again. And it's easy to say, just keep going. But in reality, it can be difficult. But I think that's what one of the key drivers of success for entrepreneurs is: just keep going. Just like Dory said, just keep swimming.
No, that's great. So could you talk a little bit, if you're willing to talk about mistakes that you've made? People say that being an entrepreneur can be a very humbling experience. Could you share, if you're willing to share, a mistake or two that you made and what you learned from that?
Sure. Just as I'd mentioned earlier, I fell probably victim to the same concepts or perceptions of what entrepreneurship is at the beginning. It's you think you're controlling your own destiny and that you're forging the path and being a pioneer into the Wild West. And I walked into it with the wrong reasons and the wrong values and concepts. Entrepreneurship is about taking responsibility and being number one person to handle those responsibilities as well as the failures. You give the credit to your team when you win, and you accept all the failures when you lose. That's literally what it is. And maybe when I first started, I walked into it with the wrong idea of what entrepreneurship is, and that was somewhat of a hard lesson to learn. The other failures I think that are really important and critical for somebody getting into it is patience. Especially this next generation, we're so used to the pace of information, technology, and knowledge being so readily available that we've become impatient. And social media shows us that there's an 18-year-old with a Ferrari that invented the next thing and had a paradigm shift. And for us, I think we have to have patience. And that's really hard to learn because it's more of a experience-based aspect. And when you start having patience, you start having humility, being appreciative of what you have, what you don't have, how hard your team works, and making sure that you've earned that right to be that leader. So every day you fight and make sure that your people are safe, your team is safe, and your company is growing, and all the shareholders that are involved are getting their end of it and making sure that they have a road to succeed as well as you do. You take a step back and you become, you're a driver, but you're also a passenger at the same time. It's hard to explain that. And the last thing is fear. I think my other failures is fear. It's really scary trying to make decisions, and fear paralyzes. So I think I've learned from those mistakes, but I would say those are probably the major ones that I've learned over the years.
And so, as you think about some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome, a lot of people, maybe before they become an entrepreneur, they might have a disillusioned view of what it might be like. Could you talk about some of the biggest obstacles that you've had to face during your career so far? So,
probably the biggest one is always yourself. The biggest obstacle will always be yourself, and having faith and knowledge and belief that whatever you're pursuing is going to work out. And you'll second guess yourself in a lot of ways. And the biggest obstacle you'll end up facing is yourself. It's making sure that you make very clear goals and outline them to the best of your ability, and make sure that you're held accountable to those goals. And doing that is really easily to be said, but at the same time, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, well, I have X amount of years that I want to figure this out and make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And if it's not working out, I need to pivot. That kind of hard conversation with yourself is actually difficult to have. And so I would say that's probably my biggest obstacle, is making sure that I don't question the path that I've taken, and to make sure to persevere and continue, because people and team members invest in you, and you have to do your best to make sure that their lives are good and that they have a career path to pursue.
No, that's great. So, Steven, during this process, I'm sure that when you face these obstacles and you overcome them, when you make mistakes and then you learn from them, could you share some of the biggest lessons that you've come to learn during these times?
I think make sure that you're humble. You definitely don't know everything, and everything that you make as an assumption could be wrong and disproven at any point. Let the data guide you, especially if you're digitally oriented like we are. One of the biggest lessons that we had was I walked into Tokyo Auto Salon, which is a trade show, with a very clear plan. I had my plan A, B, and C outlined. And I was supposed to do certain things, and I had certain people in place to help me negotiate certain things. And it completely fell apart. In the first 24 hours, my entire plan went out the window. And I was having lunch with my business partner at the time, and we're next to the beach in Japan, and we're talking about it. He said, man, why don't you just, you were going to have somebody negotiate for you. Why don't you just go for it? He's like, why don't you just walk up to him and say, hey, let's make a deal. And from my history and past, I'd always assumed that not being a native Japanese speaker, they're not going to make a deal with some stranger that they barely know. And he said, what do you have to lose? And in that moment, I realized I had nothing to lose. And I'm already here. I've already spent the money and I'm sitting here. Why not go for it? And in that scenario, it ended up, we have a new partnership with a company called Novell in Japan. And 3 years later, they're one of our biggest partners. And we now are their distributor for North America. And I consider them family. And that all happened because my carefully thought out methodical plan went out the window. And my partner just emboldened me to make a call and go for it. And so that was a huge, huge coup for us. And it's amazing to see in retrospect that it was from failure that success was born. And we're not entirely massively successful, but it blossomed into a very strong business relationship and friendship. So it's always humbled me after that to not be afraid or paralyzed.
Have you found that after that you've become more, I'm going to use the word fearless? Have you found that after that experience in Tokyo, that you're maybe you can draw on that and use that in future dealings?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the hardest things to do, and why I'm involved with the school and the Center for Leadership, is youth comes with a lot of fear of not being good enough, fear of not being the right person or having the right stuff, motley, or to do what you need to do. And I think that is a paralytic to us. And when it comes to young people, especially that are graduating or about to graduate, you've got nothing to lose. If the job requirement says 3 years of experience, just apply. What's the worst they're going to do? Say no. And so, yeah, so after that experience and after several different experiences of incrementally increasing risk, buying more inventory or making larger decisions, you slowly become more fearless because you become more experienced. And that experience makes you, more fearless. And I think a better leader. Getting punched in the face over and over again makes you a very good leader because it just, next time you get punched in the same way, you're like, oh yeah, I know what to do. I know how to handle it.
And so as you think about the lessons you've learned and the things that you've had to overcome and the perseverance, one of the things you haven't talked about in your success is you didn't talk about like always making the right decisions. You didn't talk about always knowing the answers, but rather you talked a lot about persevering. You talked a lot about working hard. You talked a lot about learning in that process. And really, I think that that's a really important lesson for everyone to hear, that it's not always about having the answers, but it's about searching for them.
So what I tell my team all the time is, if you're working on something and you look at your screen and go, man, there's probably an easier way to do this. There probably is. And I think nowadays it's not necessarily about understanding and knowing all the solutions off the top of your head. As a leader, you have to appear to have all the answers when you need to, especially when your team asks. But I think the new gambit for us, because we have Google, because we have Siri, we have all this information, is being very effective about finding out the solutions to problems, how to do that, right? How to Google the problem, what keywords I need to be able to search for to understand my problem and resolve it. If you can do that really, really effectively, you will pretty much succeed, because all the answers are already out there for us. We used to have to go through the Dewey Decimal System and sift through index cards at a library to get to the book that we needed. Now I can ask Siri and I can tell you whatever I need to know in the next 2 minutes. So incredibly critical. And for this next generation, that's the competitive edge. That's absolutely the edge that we need to utilize.
So if you could speak directly to other entrepreneurs, and more than likely those that would watch this are going to likely become entrepreneurs or people that are interested in becoming entrepreneurs, what advice would you give an entrepreneur that's thinking of starting a business, that wants to succeed, that maybe they've started a business and now they're at a crossroads? What advice would you give an entrepreneur?
There are two things that I would say. First and foremost, no matter how well you think you've planned, no matter how diligent you've been with every aspect of coordination, it's all going to go wrong. So in the end of the day, do your best to outline the most fundamental aspects of what you're trying to achieve, validate the information with friends and mentors and people that you trust to make sure that it's a solid plan, and then go for it. You'll never be able to plan for any scenario. And more importantly, one of the best advice I've ever received was a VP of another agency when I was at Cal State Fullerton. I asked him, how do you create a campaign when you're staring at a blank screen? And he said, define your parameters as narrowly as possible. Don't think outside the box. Just define it as much as possible and then begin, because it will naturally evolve to what it needs to become. So first and foremost, just begin. If you have a basic idea and you think it's a good idea, go for it. The second thing is, for me, when I started this company, I had a really hard look at myself in the mirror, and I said, by 28, you need to know what you're doing by 30. So at 28, you need to look in the mirror and say, is this working out? And have an honest conversation and an honest dialogue with yourself. If it's not, then you need to think about going to get a master's and go work for a company, because, well, you're barking up the wrong tree. So the second part I would say is, don't be afraid to begin or start. You can fail. And my goal, at least for me and my experiences, was I wanted to know what and this is different for everybody, but I wanted to know what I was doing by 30. And everything leading up to that, all the failures, totally fine. There are no consequences to most of the decisions that you'll make in terms of entrepreneurship. And this is the only time you get to be reckless and try whatever you want to try, fail, learn, evolve, and discover whether or not this is for you. Because entrepreneurship is a lifestyle that you commit to for your life. Completely commit to your life. It is a child. It will destroy you. It'll make you happier than happy. It'll make you sadder than sad. It'll be the worst and best decision of your life, and the highest highs and lowest lows. So make sure it's right for you. And if you want to dip your toes in the water, don't be afraid to make mistakes and fail, because you can always bounce back.
So you have to really understand what the cost might be and ask yourself whether it's going to be worth it.
The hard part is, unfortunately, you won't know until it's too late, but you can kind of dip your toe in the water to get a sense of it.
Oh, that's great. Steven, we do have a couple questions from our audience. So why don't we go ahead and turn to those?
Sure.
Our first question comes from Alyssa Nemnick, the Director of Talent Acquisition at Ventura Foods. Alyssa asks, how do you balance grit, persistence, and perseverance against overworking, becoming a workaholic, and shifting your work-life balance?
So, short answer is, I'm probably the worst person to ask that question to. I'm a really bad workaholic, and I really don't know how to turn off. So first and foremost, I guess, let me say, in my early to mid 20s, no such thing. Workaholic was not my vocabulary. It was my life. I just continued to push. I think as I'm getting older and I start learning certain things, there are limitations where adding another hour or two is not effective. I think the hardest thing to do and learn as an entrepreneur is that after the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 15th hour, wherever your limit is, you need to stop. You make better decisions if you're well rested, you take care of yourself, and really have a clear sense of mind. So what happens for me is I'll usually, my pace is I'll usually work like a dog for about 3-4 months and build until I pretty much explode. And then I'll take a trip overseas, because we have partners overseas, and I'll clear my head, have some meetings and things like that, decompress and disconnect. I also now mountain bike where there's no cellular reception. That's also a very fantastic way to avoid everybody. But understanding where your limitations are and disconnecting when you need to make appropriate decisions. That took me 8 years to learn, and I still am terrible at it. So how do I balance it? I don't really balance it very well, but I'm learning and I'm evolving.
So it sounds like this might be one of the areas you're still evolving in.
Yeah, and I think it's also a characteristic of people that want to be entrepreneurs. You trade the 40 for 80. You still have to do the 80, but you got to choose where you put it. And it's people that like the 80, that don't do this for the money. They do it for the pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of growth. That really put in the 80. And so it almost stops becoming workaholic or behavior in your mind or overworking. It's just doing what you like and what you love to do.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Steven. So our second question comes from Petra Robles from Anaheim. Petra asks, who has had the most influence on you during your childhood, and how did that shape your career?
It might be cliche to say, but my parents. my mom is the smartest person and most clever person I've ever met. She's always asking the question, well, I wonder what if you could make a business out of this, or maybe there's a need. So even at a very young age, my mom would constantly say, hey, look at that straw. That's a really cool design. I wonder if people need more of those. So she really instilled the entrepreneurial spirit in me, and really that's the smooth talking and the entrepreneurial extroversion probably came from her. The second aspect is my dad. He is retired, and he has the most intense curiosity I've ever seen a person have. He is interested in everything. I mean, literally, when you see a cup, he'll look at it and go, I wonder how they made that. And then he'll Google it and he'll research it. And it's that never-ending curiosity and thirst for knowledge that really helps really helps the entrepreneur become better, because we're constantly evolving and shifting in an environment that is constantly coming with new enemies and sharks in the water, and you really have to pivot here or there. And the only way to be able to do that successfully is to be able to constantly learn new things and become better. So I feel like those two aspects really created a perfect storm for me. And I feel incredibly blessed to have the parents that I do. And it's because of that situation that I feel pretty secure in the entrepreneurial side of life.
Those are two important lessons. Your mom kind of showed you how to discover the needs that are out there, and so that you're, as an entrepreneur, one of the greatest things is to solve a problem. And it sounds like your mom was instilling in you to always be looking for those opportunities that might be there. And your dad showed you to be curious and take things apart and figure out why it might be that way. And those are actually two really good lessons for entrepreneurs.
Read a lot. That's another one. Always read every day. News, information, books, audiobooks, read.
So our third question comes from Angela Patel. Angela asks, she's from Huntington Beach. Angela asks, out of all your businesses, which is your favorite? Are you allowed to say that?
So we have, there are two aspects of, I think, organizations that we have. The first is my background's in automotive. So I've been playing with cars ever since I was a kid. And because of that, no one ever has to tell me to go to work. And I'm blessed in so many different ways. They'll call me and say, hey, we need you in Germany at the Nürburgring because there's a 24-hour race and that's where we're going to do marketing. So those are bucket list items for other people. And for me, I get to call it work. So first and foremost, automotive, I live, eat, breathe it. And my counterparts none of us jumped in it for money. We all do it because we fundamentally love the industry and the people that are in it. So automotive is the first part. So on a personal basis, I enjoy automotive because it's a passion. Now, if we're talking about entrepreneurial spirit in business, we have a tool company called Genius Tools USA, and I believe that company is going to be our future. It represents a very strong, mature industry, but with exponential amount of growth. And I dug my teeth into it for the last 2 years, and the growth has been incredible and phenomenal. And constantly driving my entrepreneurial spirit is trying to find and discover some of the most effective products that are in our line that we've never thought about. It's always been there. This company is 14 years old, and I'm constantly discovering new aspects of it that could be good and incorporating it into my team. My team's even excited about developing and fostering this business. So I guess on a personal level, the automotive side; on a business level, the tools. It's just this incredible puzzle to play with.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Steven, for taking these questions from our audience. And thank you also for being a guest on our show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the time and opportunity. And I hope that anybody out there that wants to pursue entrepreneurship to just go for it. And there's no better day than today to pursue it. And the time value of money principle for $1 is $1 today is worth more than tomorrow. And time is that one resource that none of us gets back. So there's no better time than now to try to pursue your dreams. And most importantly, it's okay to fail. If you succeed or you fail, it doesn't really matter. It's about the journey. So if you're out there and you're watching this and you want to go for it, I hope you go for it. And I hope 20 years from now, you run across me at a mall and just say, man, I'm so glad that I did and that you made it. So thank you everybody for the time.
Thank you. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today's show. Today, we talked about persistence and perseverance as part of our Grit series. Please like and share and subscribe to our videos. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice as we'll bring you more relevant themes that will guide you in your leadership journey. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the College of Business and Economics and the Center for Leadership, we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.